In this video, we'll be focusing on sectionalism in the North. We'll be discussing the political, social, and economic aspects of how sectionalism affected the North in the 19th century. We will also be doing videos over sectionalism in the South as well as sectionalism in the West, so please make sure that you look in the description below for those links. First, let's go ahead and talk about economics in the North. The North was mostly focused around manufacturing. This is how many people made their money, was by working in the factories. Also during this time, immigrants were coming in waves. Most of these workers that worked in the factories were immigrants. They were also not paid very well. They were exploited for their work since they took lower wages than the American workers that were hired before. People that were escaping things like political revolutions, like the Germans. Also, the Irish were escaping the potato famine, so people were starving. People were dealing with political strife, and so they loaded up all that they had, which for the most part, it took every single penny that people had to get over to the United States to immigrate. So by the time they came to the United States, they were already in terrible poverty. So they took whatever job they had available, which for the most part were factory jobs. These jobs were highly unregulated by the government. That was what made them so popular in the free enterprise system, is that the government didn't really have much control, especially during this time. So employers could make people work for 10 hours, 12 hours, 15 hours. There was also no age restriction, so children could work at factories. There were 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds, and the factories were very dangerous places. There were also textile mills where children and women would work, where you would finally get a chance to work outside of the house as a woman. So these were things in the North that were allowing multiple people, multiple generations of people to be able to go into the workforce. A lot of Northerners lived on small farms. These small farms are going to practice subsistence farming. Subsistence farming is going to be when you only grow the amount of food that can sustain you and your family. This is because the soil that was up in the North wasn't very nutrient rich. It was very rocky soil. It also had a very short growing season. So whenever it was really cold up in the North, you couldn't sustain a crop for that long. So therefore they grew things that they could preserve for many months. So let's now move on to the social aspect of the North. Socially, the North was a giant mixture of different people that spoke different languages because we had an influx of immigrants, as we had just mentioned, for the economics portion. The Irish were mostly going to start moving to the West to work on the railroads, which we will discuss in the West video for sectionalism. Many workers in the factories are going to experience discrimination from Americans. One of these examples is going to be the formation of the Know Nothing Party. The Know Nothing Party is going to discriminate against these immigrants. They're very anti-immigrant. They think that these people are coming here and know nothing about the system of America, and all they're doing is taking the jobs that were there for hardworking Americans. These people would harass, they would torture, they would mess with these individuals that were just trying to work and find a way to support their family and themselves. Let's go ahead and move on to the political aspect of the North. So in politics during this time, we're going to have to find something to replace the Missouri Compromise of 1820. The Missouri Compromise of 1820 stated that the 3630 line, which is a latitude line, which we just kind of drew a line in the sand, And whenever we decided that line was there, that we said anything north of that line is free. You cannot own enslaved individuals anything north of that line. However, anything south of that line was free game for slavery. So this is going to cause problems now in the 1850s because we are now acquiring more territory and we're forming more territories over in the West, like the Mexican Cession, which is now split up into several territories. So we need to find a way to decide whether or not slavery should be allowed in these certain areas. So there are 4 parts of the Compromise of 1850. One of those parts is that popular sovereignty will be used to decide whether or not slavery can exist in the state that is going to be formed. This is going to lead to Bleeding Kansas, which is discussed further in the Sectionalism West video that's linked down below. Bleeding Kansas is going to cause people that are pro-slavery and anti-slavery to rush to Kansas in order to try to turn it either free or slave. Kansas will eventually become a free state, but this is not going to be without loss of American lives for fighting over whether or not we can own people. The second part of the Compromise of 1850 is going to be the Fugitive Slave Act. The Fugitive Slave Act stated that anybody from up north, if they were to encounter or find an enslaved individual that has escaped from slavery, that they are to capture them and that they can sell them for a bounty or a price down south to whoever their proper owner was. However, the problem with the Fugitive Slave Act is that people that were also freed individuals in the North had the danger of being captured and sold back into slavery. And there's not a lot of times where people would find the actual owner of these enslaved individuals and they would just be sold to the first person that would pay the fee to have them back in the South. This makes it where the North is still very much involved in slavery, no matter how much they want to deny it. The third part of the Compromise of 1850 is going to be the outlawing of the slave trade coming into Washington, D.C. from the Caribbean. So we are no longer having slaves being imported into the United States. Lastly, for the Compromise of 1850, California will enter as a free state, and this will be followed by Oregon eventually. So even though we do discuss California and Oregon in the Sectionalism West video, so geographically they are in the West, but politically they do belong to the North. So for representation reasons, for Congress, the California and Oregon area is going to belong to the North. Lastly, let's discuss the Dred Scott case. Dred Scott v. Sanford was a case decided in the Supreme Court of the United States by Judge Taney. Judge Taney is going to rule that Dred Scott is not going to be considered a person in the United States because anybody of African descent is not considered an American. So for the first time in the court of law, we are being told that African Americans are not people in the eyes of the law. Now this becomes very dangerous because these people are not citizens. They have not been treated as citizens, but now for the first time, a man is being told in the court of law, who is a black man, that he is not a citizen of the United States, and in fact, under the Fifth Amendment, that property owners, which are going to be the slave masters, they have protection of their property under the Fifth Amendment. So now we have a judge in the Supreme Court that is telling us that people of African descent are not American, and this will continue to happen for many years. Judge Taney also decided in the Dred Scott case that the Missouri Compromise of 1820 was actually deemed unconstitutional because Congress cannot have the power to control whether a state is free or enslaved. That is up to the people of the United States. So Judge Taney was a fan of having popular sovereignty being used in the new states out west because he felt that you cannot have Congress limit the expansion of slavery. Thank you for listening to this lecture over sectionalism in the North. Please make sure you look at the description to follow the links to sectionalism in the West as well as sectionalism in the South. And please subscribe and like this video for more.